just gonna put my foot on the floor and I'm not listening till I see God or a checkered flag.
Right, hello, and welcome back to episode 3 of Racing Thoughts and IndyCar Podcast. I am your host, Megan Dennis, alongside me,
Megan Taylor. Hello.
And we are back to discuss all things Road America, get you up to date with some of the gossip that we mentioned last week, continue dumb questions with Megan, and then go into an off week. So that's what you have to look forward to. Kind of kicking that off into gossip and kind of following up. 2 interesting things. I will start with what I consider kind of the less exciting of the 2, although it has some exciting moments as well. Following up from last week with everything happening with Theo Pourchaire and McLaren and Juco Hollinger Racing and everything, it officially has come out that McLaren has dumped Juco Hollinger with their strategic partnership, which I really didn't understand what that meant. I did some research to kind of be able to fill us in. So what happened really with that is, and it's kind of why JHR has been racing with the papaya on their livery and on their suits this year, is McLaren had more sponsors than they had room for on their cars. And so in order to, I know it's a good problem to have if you're McLaren, but with that, because they had too many sponsors to be able to put it on their cars and be able to put it in their branding, they partnered with Juco Hollinger to, we'll let you run our sponsorships, you can get a percentage of the money from it, and with the notion of they kind of work alongside each other, I guess with development and engineering and everything, but as everything's developed, the comments and everything, if you want more information on what's happened in the last week, go check out last week's episode. But they have officially parted ways. Going into Saturday, it really didn't seem like it meant a lot more than that one. Then we got news literally 10 minutes before second practice started Saturday morning. Maybe 30 minutes. It wasn't long at all before flag was going down, that Agustin Canapino had stepped away for the weekend for his mental health. What's happening behind the scenes there, we are not privy to that. And, I'm not going to make light of a mental health situation, but it does kind of seem like an actions have consequences things, just from kind of reading between lines. And we didn't hide where we stood on this either.
Yeah. No, we did not hide our opinions very well. But I mean, like you said, not making light of a mental health issue or whatever, but I think that's honestly a cop-out from JUCOs. I think that is their way of kind of being like, oh, we're making him step aside for his own whatever. And I think that's kind of a cowardly way to have him be benched. I think it would have been much more effective and a much better statement for them to be like, nope, we're benching him as a result of his actions and his words. So I do think it is a cop-out. And, if that truly is the case, like you said, we are not privy to those conversations that happen behind the scenes. But I like to think that if that is the case, then it's just kind of like, take responsibility for your actions, my guy. This has blown up far bigger than it needed to, just because of his own, instigation there. And now he's coming out being like, oh, my mental health, all of this other stuff. Dude, you fueled the fire. If you can't take it, don't dish it out. I don't have empathy for you if that is truly the case. So, I give major props to Arrow McLaren for absolutely just nixing that partnership. I love the fact that they even had the partnership to begin with as a result of McLaren having too many sponsors. That is just the funniest thing to me. But I think it shows a lot of integrity on McLaren's end and how much they care about their drivers and the severity of the situation. And so, you know what? I gotta give props to McLaren for that. So
100%. And like I said, we discussed it last week, so this is really just following up from it. I also read a really good article online. I will post to our stories alongside this episode that kind of really delves into what that strategic partnership was and really kind of what the ramifications of it are for JUCOs, and really why I would agree with Meg in the sense of it kind of seems like they realized, oh, we screwed up, but they're going to silently get rid of the problem. I don't know. I think that'll be interesting to watch in the coming weeks to see who's sitting in that seat. And speaking of who's sitting in that seat, this weekend, we got 19-year-old Noel Siegel in that seat very last minute in his Rainforest Cafe looking suit, flying in there. The car was not ready to go for practice. But oh my God, that little boy was so excited. I was so excited for him.
I was so proud of him. Like, especially coming off of the 500 where, he failed to qualify, out of the 33 like entrants that there are, he was the 34th and didn't get it. And he had two major crashes during the 500 qualifying and practices and stuff. And so, seeing him get his actual shot within IndyCar, I think is really fantastic. Like you said, he was just so thrilled to be there, and it was just really exciting to see like young new talent come in. It's like whenever we get to watch an F2 driver drive like a free practice in F1, or like, when Liam Lawson got pulled up, or when Ollie Behrman got pulled up. It's just like one of those, oh my God, I don't, support this team. This is not the team that I, watch races for. But oh my God, I want them to do so well because they're a kid who's, achieving everything that they want. And it's just like, I am so excited to see his career path over the next couple of years, because he is a very talented driver. And so it was really cool to see him get that opportunity. So shout out Nolan Siegel.
Anything more comes with this whole situation, we will continue to follow it because we like gossip, and also it affects McLaren. And I mean, I got my McLaren shirt on today. We don't hide it, but this is our team. This is who we support. So we'll continue to watch all that and just see what develops.
This isn't the end of it. I can guarantee you this is probably not the end of it. Just
like, I think McLaren's part of it's they're done. They've wiped their hands, and I am so glad to see from Zach Brown all the way down, they are standing by their drivers. What it means for Juco Hollinger and who's in that seat, I guess we'll find out in a couple weeks.
Yep.
All right. So now turning to Road America and everything with this weekend.
Wait,
this track,
talk about...
I forgot the most important thing.
You forget.
My notes are backwards.
Girl, how could you forget? It's our little brother we're going to talk about here.
More important gossip on the list. David Malakus.
David Malakus. Yeah, so I just want to preface this entire section by saying that during our podcast prep and everything, we have a shared notes app that we just like put down talking points throughout the week, throughout the race weekend, everything. And, last week Megan had shared it, and like it was literally the first three things. It was introduction, and then you said we need to watch what's happening with the 66 car and Meyer Shank. Connor Daly alluded it's going to be very interesting. Immediately the next bullet point, I miss David Malakus, in parentheses, IDK if that's a talking point, just a fact. Completely
and I
unrelated.
Stand by it. Yeah, these were
unrelated thoughts.
Shout out to Connor Daly and his podcast. I don't actually know the name of it, but it's really good. And the nice thing about that, and also like off track with Hinch and Rossi, is you kind of get like a lot of gossip. We just happen to record before they do, so we get the gossip a little bit later to be able to plug that in. But Connor Daly had said, yeah, I tried to get into that car and they told me no, but I think something really interesting is going to happen with that.
And something really interesting did happen with that.
Really interesting did happen. Meg, fill us in on what really interesting happened there.
So I don't even remember how this all came to be. At what point of the weekend? Was it like Thursday or Friday?
I think it was Friday.
I think it was Friday.
After practice 1 on Friday.
Yeah.
So like Friday afternoon.
And it was just like, mind you, on Friday afternoon, I am still at work doing my thing. And like, I'll just occasionally go on Instagram in between my classes. And I just see like the breaking news from IndyCar that David Malakus is back in the number 66 car for Meyer Shank. So, we love to see it. I think, the whole saga with David Malakus this year has just been one that we've been following because I think we love David just because of how sweet he is and just how entertaining he can be. And also he's like a very good driver. I remember watching him a lot last year and just really thoroughly enjoying having him on the grid. And then I was so excited when he joined Arrow McLaren. And, then apparently race car drivers have a thing with going on bikes and breaking their hands, which I think race car drivers should now have clause in their contract to not ride bikes, because there's now been like 4 or 5 different race car drivers in different series, mind you, who have been on a bike and then broken their hands. So like something's got to stop there. But yeah, so he broke his wrist and has been out. You know, he's been doing rehab and kind of getting better and, you know, doing physical therapy, strength rehab and everything. But I believe they're like in his Aero McLaren contract, it was like you can only miss a certain amount of races before, you know, sponsorship stuff has to kind of make its way around. I don't know all of the details of it, but, you know, it was actually Barber weekend that he got dropped. And that was very sad. And then, you know, he did content for the 500, which was really cool. Love to see him in the paddock there. But shout out Meyer Shank for picking him back up. We love to see it, giving him another opportunity to drive. And, you know, we'll talk about this a little bit later in the episode as well, but they were doing hybrid testing today and he was back in the car for the first time, and you could like, he posted about it on his Instagram story, and it was just like so wholesome and sweet to see how excited he was to be back in a car. And so again, we'll touch on the testing stuff later on in the episode, but you know, shout out Meyer Shank and yay for David Malakus for getting back into a car. Yay. I can't wait to see what he does the rest of the season.
All right. On to Road America. Very cool racetrack. I understand why the drivers, like a lot of the drivers talk about it being one of their favorite courses. Would love the opportunity to get up there at some point in the future. Like it looks really cool. Good track. Interesting race weekend as a whole.
That is an understatement.
I am going to start off with some exciting news for only me, but I finally found out what a spotter's guide was and that it has all the liveries on it. And now I don't have to be quite as misinformed on who is driving what cars.
Yeah, we love the spotter's guide because it helps us, especially when you're at a race as well. Like it's very helpful to see when the cars go by, but being able to see it on the TV and just because the cars will often change liveries depending on sponsorships as well. Like Marcus Armstrong is a perfect example of that. Like he runs either a green livery or a red one. I never know which one he's going to be using. He's switched it up a handful of times. So being able to have that spotter guide being like, okay, so and so is now running a different kind of livery. So this is what I need to look for when I'm looking for them out on the track.
Well, it's like Scott McLaughlin's had 4 different liveries the last 4 races. And I'm like, no, I was told at Barber he drives the meat wagon, and we haven't seen the meat wagon since.
Oh my God, I forgot about the meat wagon. So yes, congratulations on learning what a spotter's guide is. We will post them all the time, every race weekend on our Instagram. So that way, in case anybody else needs to learn what they are, you have them there. I will say, you made a hilarious comparison on our Instagram for Stingray Rom's car.
It looks like 101 Dalmatians. He thought it was funny.
Shout out to a fantastic movie, by the way. My nephew is obsessed with it. Like, he watches it every day. So now, every time I see Stingray Rob's car, I think of my nephew and his obsession with Pongo.
Weather was a big factor into everything but the race, weirdly. A lot of rain, a lot of sliding. Turn 14 was a beast and a half all weekend.
Brutal.
And just, you go off and you're sliding. 2 really bad crashes this weekend in practices. Well, practice and one in quali. Romain Grosjean took the whole front of his car off in turn 14. Luckily, he was perfectly fine. They got his car up and running the next day. So nothing too bad there. Scarier into that was definitely Joseph Newgarden's crash in qualifying.
Oh my God. They kept replaying it too, which is just horrifying. But like, I get it. Like, you want to see what happens. But I mean, it is kind of like a very sobering reminder of exactly how dangerous the sport can be. And, you know, he had upwards of 80 Gs on that crash. Like, I think it was like between 80 to 95 Gs on that crash. And if you saw it or like saw any of the replays, you could hear the tire screeching. You could hear the car doing what it's designed to do with the crumple zones, which fantastic job on the engineer's part. Your car did exactly what it is designed to do. And, you know, luckily he got out and he was seen and released by medical. But yeah, majorly scary, especially in those conditions. And, you know, quality the entire time was just a massive question mark in terms of tires and strategies and, you know, what do you do? Like, because you had a racetrack that was wet, but then, you know, is there a drying race line? We don't really know. But then by the time we got to the Fast Six, there was. And then Joseph Newgarden just barely went onto like the curb or the dirt and like onto the part that wasn't dry and just totally fishtailed off. So really scary to see. So happy that he's okay. And shout out to the Penske team as well for being able to rebuild his car and, you know, make it so that it was good enough to race on Sunday.
Yeah, because he had a whole new car come Sunday because that's how just demolished that one was. And,
yeah.
I mean, thankfully he was okay because that, and thankfully for the safer tire barrier that they have up there, that based on what I was hearing kind of sounds like that's a relatively new addition, because I think if he had gone into the concrete at 130 miles an hour, I don't know what would have been the consequence of it, but I don't think it would have been anything good.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it on the podcast before when we were doing a lot of the previews for Detroit, because Detroit does not have the safer barriers, and I made my opinions very clear about that. So if you want to get kind of like a lowdown on what the safer barriers are and a little bit about that, you can go back to one of those episodes.
Episode 1 for those who want to know.
Safer barriers, we love that technology. I want to see it on every single course. I want to see it on every single track because it did exactly what it's supposed to do. And, you know, there's engineers and scientists who have dedicated their whole lives to building the safer option so that, you know, we get to see drivers walk away the way that Joseph Newgarden did. So I love to see those types of technological advances there. And it allowed a driver who we don't know what the consequences would have been, like you said, if that was not there.
Before we kind of get into the race, I have 2 more kind of, I guess, fun facts, for lack of a better word. Firstly, this was only the second time this year that Alexander Rossi has made it into the Fast 12, which feels incorrect, but I went back and did check that out, and it's completely true. So I just kind of is a testament to how well he has done in recovery races, and also not just for him, but kind of the McLaren in general, how much they kind of have been struggling in qualifying all year. Shout out to Rossi for having a really good qualifying this weekend, and hoping now that we're kind of done with street courses, which his car does not like.
Yeah.
I think we have 1 more left, mostly done with street courses, that like he'll continue to improve there. Other fact that I found out about this weekend is they have essentially timeout for IndyCar drivers. And this made me laugh a lot. So in practice, it happened to Kyle Kirkwood and Alexander Rossi. I don't know if it happened to anyone else, but I know it happened to those 2, where they caused red flags. And so they ended up getting 5-minute penalties, which meant they had to essentially sit in timeout in the pit lane in their car for 5 minutes before they were allowed back on track. And it just really made me laugh. And then you also add in the fact that like Rossi's mechanics were sitting there like giving him candy while he sat in timeout.
It's like a kid owing time at recess in elementary school. It's just like, all right, you're going to sit next to the teacher. The teacher's like this pushover who's like, all right, whatever, fine. Like, I'm going to sit and chat with you. We're going to hang out and talk until your time is up, whatever. But yes, they do have a specific rule. And it's basically saying that the time penalty must be fulfilled when directed by IndyCar, and that penalty begins when the member's car and personnel are in pit lane. And it's kind of like at IndyCar's discretion. So they can kind of determine what is unsafe versus not. And considering it happened in a practice, they weren't going to penalize him, obviously, on the race. So it was going to be 5 minutes in the pit lane during practice, which, to be fair, during a kind of unpredictable and crazy weekend in terms of weather, any running time is valuable. So that is a pretty solid penalty to give. If it was like a dry, sunny weekend, maybe it would have been kind of like, like, okay, I lost 5 minutes. I could have lost 5 minutes by just getting out of my car and talking to my engineers. Not that big of a deal. But with the unpredictability, you kind of do want to be on track for this kind of weekend. So I get it. I didn't see what Kyle got the penalty for.
Kyle went off in turn 14. There's a lot of grass there, so it really didn't cause any problems. It was more, he got his just because he caused a red flag, and apparently it was, you cause a red flag, you're getting that 5-minute penalty no matter what. I don't know if that's an always thing, but it definitely was for this weekend.
Well, that's going to be something I look up later. To the rule book, which has now become my favorite tab on my computer, guys. If you've seen the Instagram stories, and if you could see the text messages between me and Megan last night.
I was very worried I was causing unintentional homework, and like, I'm a PE teacher by trade. We don't do homework.
I was so excited. I don't think I was like articulating how excited I was to actually learn so many detailed rules and so many detailed like specs and stuff that I was just like, this is great. So I will look up that rule and we'll circle back and let you guys know when I figure it out.
Before really jumping into, I guess, biggest winners, biggest losers, because I kind of, at least I know on my end, will kind of compass everything that kind of went to the race. I will say, shout out to Jamie Chadwick for being the first female winner in 14 years to win a Indy Next race.
Really, really wonderful to see. Like, that's just huge for women in motorsport in general. So, you know, super happy to see. And it was also really cool to see how many drivers and teams were so supportive and like making statements and showing that kind of support and acceptance there. It wasn't like, it didn't feel forced. It felt very genuine, you know? So that was awesome to see.
The race was I don't want to say it was a mess. It was started off as a mess, and then it was just kind of, I don't know. I don't even know what the word was. Yeah, it was a race. Like, no more, no less. It was a race.
If you listened to last week's episode, you know that I have major questions about whether or not we are going to get through lap 1 without cautions. The answer is no. No, we are not. Not yet. We are still waiting.
It has been 0 races without a lap 1 incident.
So yeah, that was really tough to watch at the start. So, meh.
I have plenty with my biggest losers, or whatever we will eventually change the segment title to be able to add to that, which, I mean, I guess, like I said, in my opinion, you get through like the first 10 laps, it kind of just settled into a race, and really truly a Penske race. So I guess I can just kind of jump into kind of my biggest winners with that. Penske in general, I mean, 1, 2, 3, Will Power, Joseph Newgarden, Scott McLaughlin. The strategies were amazing. It was really impressive to see how well the overcut actually worked this weekend. Mm-hmm. And with that, man, how can you not love Will Power and him finally winning? And just,
yeah,
I mean, for a man who's done it, he's won it all. Like, mm-hmm. He knows what that feels. He went a whole year without winning a race. But more importantly, like, you look at what's kind of happened with him and his wife Liz in the past year or so, like, this was more than just a race win to him.
Yeah.
And that's definitely my biggest winner for the week, was just getting to see that and getting to see just kind of the pure joy from him, from Liz, from the fact that you can kind of tell he's glad he didn't retire when things were really, really, really bad last year.
I think, you know, you had touched upon it, that everything that happened with, you know, his wife Liz last year, he's just kind of happy to be there and happy to be living the life that he is right now. And it was just kind of like bringing him back into his love of IndyCar and his love of racing. Because, I mean, he's the first one to admit it, that last year he was off. And literally no one blames him for it. Like, no one can look at him and his performances and be like, ugh, how dare he? Because, like, look at the context, you know? So it was just, like, really wonderful to see, and I thought it was absolutely hilarious that he stalled out on his donuts.
Yes.
Like, his commentary, he was like, "You could tell I haven't done this in a while. I just stalled." And, like, everyone was just so happy for him. Like, you know, you hear the commentary, you hear, you know, his coworkers and the other drivers are just kind of like, he seems like a good guy. And like you mentioned, we're not the biggest fans of Penske, but like I can respect the hell out of them for what they were able to accomplish this entire weekend. So yeah, I agree. Willpower is like he tops my biggest winners there.
And I can't not mention biggest winners and not talk about Mr. Consistency, Kyle Kirkwood. His lowest finish of the year has been a P11, and relatively it's been P4, P5, P6. So Mr. Consistency indeed, keeping it up, kind of the best of the rest right now. So keep going in your Barbie car, sir. I am rooting for you.
Way to go, Florida man. No, I totally agree with that as well. I think Kyle has been absolutely fantastic, just race after race after race. Like, I know we talk about him all the time, but that's because he just puts in such good stints and good efforts. And I mean, like last weekend in Detroit, he was making really good racing calls in terms of strategies with the tires and the weather. This weekend, he just kind of like kept his head down and ran a very good race. It's just unfortunate that can't beat a Penske car right now. So yeah, we love Kyle Kirkwood. I feel like I say that every episode, but love to see it. I will also say my other biggest winner is Lundqvist for getting pole for the first time as a rookie. And just his entire celebration on Saturday was so just wholesome to watch. Like he was so genuinely excited. And it just like made me genuinely excited. Like I have zero connections to Lundqvist. Like I don't really watch him or watch his team, but I'm just kind of like, wow, that is what every race car driver dreams of. You know, that's kind of like your step into it and hopefully getting a win. You know, he got his first podium in Barber. So, yes, Lundqvist, I think, is my biggest winner, one of them at least, because he did get his first pole as a rookie. And just like his genuine excitement is so wonderful to see. It's infectious. It kind of reminds you why you get so excited about racing and stuff like that. You know, it's unfortunate that when you have so many incredible drivers that you know, you don't always get to see drivers like Lundqvist kind of achieve those things because you do get those drivers who are consistently getting on pole all the time, you know, and that's not to say that those drivers don't deserve it and they don't deserve their celebration there. But like, at what point does it kind of get desensitized as to how exciting it can actually be? So seeing Lundqvist doing it for the first time was just kind of like, oh yeah, this is the excitement that you get. So shout out to him.
I'm gonna counter and say I also had him on my biggest loser
Same.
and it was of no fault of his own. I mean, he got punted by his own teammate, and it caused a heap of a mess. Into turn 1, lap 1.
My favorite place ever. Yeah, that whole turn 1, lap 1 was absolutely insane because you had Marcus and Lundqvist go into each other. That caused a whole thing. Pato got screwed over by it because he went off course trying to avoid all of that. Pretty sure Kyle went off as well, trying
and
to
inherited P1
it.
in the process.
He did.
Kyle did very well avoiding all of that. His
Absolutely.
partner in crime and Colton Herta, however, not so much. Who I also have on my biggest losers for this week. And again, I mean, he finished P6, and you know, you're like, okay, that's a good finish. But he started higher than that. Yes, he has a very good car. He was set up to honestly probably win. And I am not, you know, in charge of penalties in IndyCar, probably for the betterment of everybody involved. But Colton said it himself. I'm just like, Joseph fully ran into him. and accelerated into it. Marcus Armstrong got a penalty for running into his teammate, which doesn't help anyone at Ganassi.
No.
But Joseph Newgarden gets nothing for essentially kind of running Colton Herta's race. I mean, yes, he finished P6, but he went from wherever he started, P4,
P2.
P2.
Yeah, that was also a hilarious question during qualifying. Was he was like, I thought P4, and then we were like, no, it's P2, and he was like, yay, go P2. Probably should have led most of the race and probably could have won it, especially because of last year and how dominant he was on the track last year, and then got screwed over as a result of like fuel saving, and his last pit stop strategy was just too early, which led to Palou winning. So, you know, I think his team learned from that and was fully ready to deliver a strategy that was going to give him the best shot at winning, especially being that far up front, to then just getting totally shunted.
There just not being any kind of actions taken, regardless on what side you fall onto it. Colton has some interesting comments to say about that one.
You know, Colton, I get it. My guy, I get it. I don't think that those are some comments that we should be making. So I don't know if I can agree with you on the severity of it, but I do agree with the sentiment.
And I'm just going to go with, if you want to know, go look it up yourself. I don't think we're going to engage too much into that mess.
No.
But Colton, be mad. I support you. Be mad.
Be mad, but not that mad.
Not that
mad. Not that mad. Please.
No actions to match words. Just be mad.
Yeah, I think Colton was definitely on my biggest losers list as well, which sucked because I really would have loved to see him run a very good race.
And then poor Kiffin Simpson. I feel bad for him too. Of just like kid qualified well, and then again got taken out by his teammate. Like it was a bad weekend for Ganassi Racing.
Yeah, except for Palou, who finished 4th.
He survived the Chip Ganassi teammate on teammate crime, so I guess kudos to him or whatever. That's all I have on Road America. Do you have anything else to add?
The Bobs.
The Bob. I want to be a Bob. I'm made to be a Bob.
Yeah, I think we can be Bobs. I think my favorite part about the Bobs is the fact that none of their names are Bob.
Yeah.
So for context, guys, so there's this group of 4 older gentlemen who have been going to Road America for 40 some odd years. They just go for the weekend, have themselves a time, and they just look like they're enjoying themselves and not having a care in the world. Just drinking, enjoying the weather, whatever that weather might be. And, you know, they're whole vibes. And I think we can get there at some point in our lives. But yeah, the Bobs are the last bit that I have from Road America.
It was fun. Road America, if you want us there next year, we will gladly go and become one with the Bobs. Switching gears, which does kind of go along with some of the stuff that happened this weekend. Our new favorite segment, Dumb Questions with Megan. Explain to me IndyCar tires. And more importantly, why are there different colored alternate tires? Because we have had green tires, and then we were back to the reds, and then we got the primaries. What's happening here?
Okay, so basically, Firestone's the manufacturer for the tires, the same way that Pirelli is the manufacturer for the tires in F1. So Firestone specifically has engineered these tires for the type of course that they're going to be used on. Now, there's a couple kind of bits of information that I'm going to go into, but first I'm going to explain the 4 different kinds of tires that you could potentially see. So first, and the one that you will see the most and on every single course, is going to be the primaries. Those are the ones that you will hear called blacks. That is because their outside rim is colored black so that it's differentiated in color. And the primary blacks are basically the ones that you want to use most often. They are used on all 3 types of tracks. So that is the oval, road, and street. and they offer a very competitive balance between speed, cornering, and durability. So they're going to last you a long time, and then they balance in between speed and cornering, which is really vital for these cars. So that's primary blacks. Next up, you will see and hear about alternate tires. There's two different kinds, like you had mentioned. The first one is going to be your alternate reds, and those are a softer compound, allowing for much faster speeds and significantly better cornering. And because of the softer compound, there's a lot more grip to it. The caveat to that, though, is because they're softer and they have higher grip, they're going to wear incredibly quickly. So you're going to get really fast for a very small amount of time. Sometimes, depending on the course, you might only get a couple laps out of it, and then your car is just going to kind of get incredibly off balance. And then you also have your alternate greens. So that is a new addition, and they're new addition from 2023. And they are provided for all temporary street courses. So you're not going to see them on a road track, and you're not going to see them on an oval. And they feature a natural rubber that is grown in Arizona outside of Firestone's kind of manufacturing plant. And their whole emphasis is sustainability. So because it's grown within the United States and they have their own kind of manufacturing plant there, it is much more sustainable. It allows for kind of a higher level of control. And I will give Firestone props for trying to up their sustainability impact. So that is the greens. You won't see them very often, but the hope from Firestone is that they will be able to be used more mainstream in their own cars, but also within IndyCar as well. So yes, those are your two different types of alternate tires, is your red and greens. But then you also have your rain tires, which your rain tires are actually going to be a little bit different. If you're coming from Formula One, you know that you have like inters and then you have wets. In IndyCar, there's only rain tires. There's only wet tires. Essentially, what those rain tires are meant for is, shocking, wet conditions. And they have a grooved tread pattern. And specifically, that is meant to kind of wick the water away from the tire and away from the car so that you do get better grip control, and it helps prevent hydroplaning. That is only ever going to be used on a road and a street course. You're never going to see it on an oval, because if you are at an oval course, there is no wet weather running at all. So if you watched the 500 at all, you'll know this, that they just won't put cars out on the track for safety reasons. They just haven't been able to engineer tires, I think, that are safe enough to go on ovals. And I fully accept that, and I fully support that idea. So that's the overall gist of the separate tires. The main thing when it comes to tires and when it comes to strategy is getting the drivers on the right kind of rubber at the right time. So in this past race, you saw a lot of drivers kind of mixed with what tire that they were going to start on, whether that was going to be the reds or the blacks. With Road America being as long as it is, the alternates were not going to be a good running choice for the cars, because you're really not going to get a good amount of laps done with the reds before they start falling apart. And that is exactly what happened to Scott Dixon. If you go online, you can take a look, or even if you saw the broadcast, they kind of zoomed in on his pit lane after he pitted to take the reds off and put the primaries back on in the second half of the race. It looked absolutely shredded. And that is exactly what happens to the red tires, the softer compounds. When I was doing research on this, the thing that I saw is like feast or famine. It's like, it's either going to be so good for you because it's incredibly fast, or it's just going to absolutely kill your race, which is exactly what happened with Scott Dixon, which was really upsetting to see, considering he was our championship leader going into this race. But yeah, the alternates degrade much faster, whereas the primaries, they're quick, but not as fast, but they're incredibly reliable and they have strong staying power. So they're able to wrestle their cars without unreasonable amount of resistance there. Let me pull up the quote that I found that really kind of gets you an understanding of the difference between these tires are. So the quote that I saw that really kind of explains the difference between the primaries and the reds in a very hilarious sense is that the primaries are a driver's reliable, predictable old friend, never causing a fuss, just playing their part. Alternates are Uncle Jack, who has 6 arrests for disturbing the peace and brings fireworks to Thanksgiving dinner. Life wouldn't be complete without both of them. So the alternates, very exciting. They can really kind of put you at an advantage. And if you start on them and it's a shorter course, then you can really kind of try to sprint the first couple of laps and then change it to the primary blacks and then run your race from there. Or if you really want to gamble it and have your last stint be reds, then that can kind of pay off for you as well. So tires, man, I don't know. It's an enigma. Like, you can understand it at a basic level, but it's always going to be different depending on the track. So yeah, that's my spiel about tires.
All right. So I guess this week we are off.
Yes.
So we're gonna preview Laguna Seca Grand Prix something Monterey, whatever it's called, next week.
Yep.
But kind of what's happening this week. Flo and Grosjean are both doing Le Mans this weekend, separate teams, but both of them are racing in 24 hours of Le Mans. So they were not actually involved in the hybrid testing that took place today, which second bit of news with that is we essentially kind of had mini race happening in Milwaukee. So the Oval in Milwaukee doing hybrid testing. I believe this is the last kind of shakedown before we actually see the hybrids at Mid-Ohio. They had a timing screen for it, and I was checking it out. And when I went to go look it up right before we started recording so I could give you accurate information on what the meaningless numbers kind of ended up being, IndyCar said no timing screen for you. And they are completely gone in everywhere that I've looked. So I guess that is kind of fun in that, like, we aren't going to kind of run hybrids before we really just see them in a few weeks. But excitingly, for us at least, what I last saw on the timing screens at some point during the running was David Malakus was P1, Pato Award was P2, and Alexander Rossi was P3. So for as far as this podcast goes, we're very happy, and that's where everything finished for the day.
Yeah. You sent me a screenshot of the timing of those 3, and it was just kind of like one of those stop the race moments. Stop. That's all I ever want to see. But yes, this test was the full field test, and it has been in the works for the past couple of months. It was allowing the teams to finalize the implementation ahead of the debut of the hybrid system that's coming in July at the Honda Indy 200 at Mid-Ohio. Yeah, we want to make sure that the teams are kind of settled in their implementation process and see kind of where they go, because there's already been a lot of issues with implementing the hybrid system to begin with. Like, it was supposed to happen at the beginning of this year, and they just have pushed it back, which again, I fully am supportive of, because we don't want a system to be implemented before all of the kinks have been worked out. And I think that's kind of what this shakedown was for today. And they've done a shakedown already at Barber,
Sebring, and at least one other, but I don't know the other location off the top of my head.
Yeah, I know Barber and Sebring for sure. But, the fact that they are putting so much time and effort into doing these testing sessions brings me a lot of hope. So we'll see what the aftermath of the testing session is. Hopefully it means that we actually get to see the hybrid system in Mid-Ohio, and hopefully we don't get it pushed back any further, because it is really interesting, and I am so excited to talk about it.
As Meg said, we'll do a complete deep dive the off week right before Mid-Ohio, really kind of breaking down what in the world is about to be changing. So look for that in a couple of weeks. It's coming up sooner than we think.
Yeah.
Only other last kind of interesting piece of news that I have for the week is Catherine Legg is going to race the remaining ovals for the 51 car for the rest of the year. So good for her. We love to see it.
It's awesome. We love to see women in motorsport doing their thing. And, I love the fact that she's getting an opportunity to race the rest of the ovals because I've just seen her, race in the 500. So I can't wait to see what she produces in the next few ovals.
Yeah, that's that Dale Coyne racing seat that's been kind of all over the place all year. So I don't know if that's super shocking. I can't say it's something I've kept up with very interesting, but excited for her. Hope she does well rest of the way out. And I guess whatever oval we'll have next, we'll see her there.
Exactly.
I guess all I have left is to go through our standings and where we currently stand. With it yet again, a new race leader.
Yeah, we got a little bit of a shakeup, so I am excited because I didn't see it after the race.
So going from the top 10 backwards as always, Felix Rosenquist is in 10th. Rossi probably had the biggest change in that kind of top 10 standing. He is now down to 9th. Joseph Newgarden is in 8th. Colton Herta is in 7th. Kyle Kirkwood is in 6th. Scott McLaughlin in 5th. Pato Ward is holding solid in 4th. Scott Dixon went from 1st to 3rd. Alex Palou is still holding that 2nd spot. And then your new IndyCar race series leader at the moment is Mr. Will Power.
I love to hear it. And I am so excited to see where these changes are going to be made over the next couple of races, because at this point, it kind of feels like anybody's game with the amount of shakeups that we've had. Just awesome to see. It just makes for very exciting racing. So
yeah, that 4 through 10 spot are all within really about 40 points of each other. So I really think, one of them ends up with a win. You're going to see, again, kind of a big shakeup between that midfield. I think if we see anyone in that top 3, because they are probably roughly a 40-point gap between 3rd and 4th right now, if we see them kind of continue to kind of get those wins, it will probably be one of those 3 to kind of watch and see who kind of pulls away. But
yeah.
I mean, we've had different race winners just about every single race this year. It's been fun. I think that's something to continue to watch and continue to look at. And of course, we will preview what we kind of have as our predictions going into Laguna Seca next week. And speaking of next week, our first off week, of course, we're going to preview Laguna Seca. But on top of that, I think we're finally going to delve into our kind of intro to IndyCar primer, kind of discuss our faves maybe a little bit in more depth. We've had some folks that are listening to the podcast ask to be like, hey, what is this thing? So maybe we can break that down kind of in our simplest format and hopefully invite more people to follow along because it's fun here. At least I'm having fun.
Yeah, it's a blast. So the more people that we can get to understand and watch, the better. It's exciting racing. So yeah, we'll see what happens. And if any of you guys have suggestions as well as to what you want to hear us talk about on an off week, we would love to hear them. We are yappers, so we can talk about literally anything. So yeah, just give us ideas, DM us on the pod Instagram.
So I think that kind of wraps up this week's episode. It's been fun. Again, follow the podcast at Racing Thoughts Podcast on Instagram. Actually, follow the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It'll help us get to more people, hopefully. Like, subscribe, 5-star. I don't know how any of that works, but someone other than my mother go do it for us. That'd be cool. That's all I got, though.
Yeah, same here. So we will see you next week on our off week, and we will preview our next race.
Bye, y'all.
See ya.